Hello, wonderful listeners. This is Joanna Dos Santos from Mindful Counseling. I welcome you today on a topic based on connecting. And back at the end of 2021, I believe November, I did an episode on human connections and how important they are. However, in the recent days and weeks, I've been connecting to children and speaking to children, and only to realize how important it is to connect with them. And I think in a lot of ways we have a tendency as adults to connect with our children who are young. I'm not talking about teenagers. I think teenagers, not that they need connections, they sure do need to have connections with parents, but they are also teenagers and they have a tendency to wanting to be a little bit separate, to individualize, to do their own things, which of course in some ways provides their own growth. When I talk about connecting with children, I'm talking about the little ones, the young ones, because they have a tendency to have tremendous amounts of anxieties that are not necessarily talked aloud. And what I've noticed is that as parents, we have a tendency to drop off our kids at school or have them being picked up by buses and so on. But what we don't realize that children actually have a lot of thoughts about wanting to know what their parents do. And they fantasize or imagine or dream when they are in school what their parents are doing, what they're doing at work, and what they're doing at home, or any particular location that they are located in. So children obviously in some ways need that reassurance. And I think we as parents, as grown individuals, we don't think about it much. I think we have a tendency to just drop off our children at school or have their caretakers take them to school, and we know that they are in school. Obviously, I'm talking about the young ones, not to get into the specifics of what teenagers have a tendency to do. That might be a next topic conversation. So when I'm talking about children, we don't worry about it. We just drop them off at school and move on with our daily responsibilities of work. Now, children, on the other hand, because they are not necessarily mature yet and their brains have not necessarily developed to be faced with particular challenges in life and what life has to offer, they don't have that conclusion. So they often wonder. And because they wonder, they can get anxious. And that anxiety can impact their schoolwork and socializing, amongst, of course, other things that might arise. So when I talk about human connections, I'm talking about connecting with our children and children connections. They're little humans too, and we oftentimes have a tendency to forget. We just tell them what they need to do, what chores they need to complete, unless, of course, we have a tendency to do the chores for them. But there's no real connections with children. Now, I'm not saying to have a full-blown conversation with a 2-year-old, but think about your 7-year-old or a 10-year-old, maybe even a 5-year-old. They do wonder, and they are curious. And I don't mean say everything to them, because there are certain things that adults carry, but to at least give them reassurance or to enable the conversations of what their school was like, what they did, what were they curious, and let them know how your day was, even if it was stressful. So that way children can know that stress does exist, that they're not the only ones. When I say let them know what your day looks like, focus on the things that you believe a child can handle. That you may have had a stressful day at work because something didn't work out and you needed to figure it out, or that you too also thought about your child and worried about them and were curious what they were doing, if they were having lunch at a particular hour. It's okay to let them know that. For those of us who are listening, for those of you who have children, be curious whether you do quite a bit of that or maybe not enough or nothing at all because you're going about your day. This allows us to have better connections with our children and not necessarily focus so much on social media, which yet is another topic, something that we have a tendency to do a lot. We forget about the actual human connections, the children connections, because you are either on a phone or on a computer answering emails, scrolling through, and your child might be on an iPad, which, let's face it, is a pretty big problem nowadays. So we are forgetting to connect. We have expectations, but we're forgetting how to connect. So be mindful how important connecting with children is. It's not just about running errands and taking them to their activities from one activity to the other. It's actually asking questions, letting them know if you played a sport or if you were involved in particular activities or if you were not and that you wished you did. Remember, connecting with children also engages them in possibly having better future connections with friends or partners, marriages. So whatever you are showing them is exactly what they will mimic, and children thrive on it. If they see that we are not connecting with them, they will not necessarily connect with us much or long for connections without necessarily knowing what they may look like. We don't want to play a guessing game here, but think about what are some of the things that you can ask your child today, and maybe not even ask. Let them know what your day looked like, what you had for lunch, and maybe that it was not your favorite food, or that you had a conflict at work with someone who may have said something to you and how you handled it. Whether your child understands it or not, they are listening to you. And talk to them when we are both not on telephones or computers, but maybe when you are walking or driving. Remember, for those of us who are adults, I would probably say a good 30s and 40s. I'll say 40s maybe more so. Remember what you had and didn't have while growing up. Whether or not you were attached to a telephone, a computer, definitely maybe not a computer, and some of the things that you did with your parents or with others by socializing. Think about how good those days may have been and what the children are lacking today. It's important to talk to your kids about what they're doing and what you're doing. This allows us to have better social connections, to still continue having them and not necessarily relying to have them on a phone. Now, for those of us who are extremely busy, parents who are always working or multiple jobs or long hours, I get it. It might be difficult to connect with kids, but we can all try to be creative and find ways to communicating. Pick up a paper and a pen and write to your child. It's something that we used to do when we were younger. It does not hurt to do that. Nowadays, we can even voice call. Not that I'm encouraging phones, obviously I'm saying the opposite, but for those of us who are extremely busy. So think about maybe one way that you can connect with your child today. And how can you let them know that you do think about them, or that you worry about them, or how stressful your day was, and maybe also how good your day was, how you may have resolved a conflict. Children want to know what parents are doing, even when they are in school. Until next time, be well.